Tonight, for the first time, police video showing what happened inside Gene Hackman's home.
Leah Chavez spent hours looking at the footage and shows us what they saw.
On a quiet February afternoon in Santa Fe, New Mexico, a discovery was made that would shock the world. Inside a private gated estate, far away from the noise of Hollywood and the public eye, investigators found something that seemed impossible to explain. A legendary actor who had spent decades entertaining millions was gone. His wife, the woman who had been by his side for years, was gone too. And inside the house, there were more questions than answers. There were no signs of a break-in. No evidence of a struggle. Nothing valuable had been stolen. The expensive artwork remained untouched. The home looked almost exactly as it had before. But two people were dead in separate rooms, and a mystery had begun. For a short time, the world wondered if there was something darker hiding behind the walls of that quiet New Mexico home. But as investigators slowly reconstructed what happened, they uncovered a story far more tragic than any rumor. A story about aging, illness, isolation, and the devastating consequences of a life built around privacy. This was the final chapter of Gene Hackman's life. For more than 50 years, Gene Hackman was one of the most respected actors in American cinema. His performances defined generations of movies. He played powerful leaders, criminals, heroes, and complicated characters who stayed with audiences long after the credits rolled. He was not just famous. He was considered one of the greatest actors of his generation. But after retiring from acting, Gene Hackman did something that almost no celebrity does. He disappeared. While many famous people spend their retirement years staying in the spotlight, giving interviews, attending events, and remaining connected with fans, Hackman chose the opposite path. He left Hollywood behind. He moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where he could live quietly away from cameras and attention. He spent his days painting, writing, riding his bicycle, and enjoying a peaceful life far removed from the world that had made him famous. For nearly 2 decades, the man who once dominated movie screens became almost invisible. Many people knew his films, but fewer and fewer people knew about the man himself. And in that private world, there was one person who mattered more than anyone else. His wife, Betsy Arakawa. Betsy was not simply his partner. She was the person who helped organize their daily life, managed important details, and supported him as he grew older. Their relationship was built away from the spotlight. They did not seek attention. They created a small world of their own inside their Santa Fe home. But as time passed, that world became more dependent on Betsy. Gene Hackman was approaching the end of his life, and age had brought serious challenges. Behind the scenes, he was dealing with advanced Alzheimer's disease, a condition that slowly affects memory, judgment, and the ability to handle everyday situations. The public rarely saw this side of him. The powerful actor who once commanded the screen was now an elderly man whose life depended heavily on the person closest to him. And that person was Betsy. Then came the week that changed everything. Investigators later determined that Betsy likely died first. The clues were scattered across the final days of her life. Her phone records, computer activity, purchases, and movements helped authorities create a timeline. At first, nothing seemed unusual. She lived a normal routine. She handled errands. She took care of their pets. She communicated with people she knew. There was no obvious warning that something terrible was about to happen. But behind the ordinary details, something was wrong. In the days before her death, Betsy had searched online for information about symptoms that sounded like a common illness. She was trying to understand what was happening to her body. She was looking for answers. Like many people do, she searched for explanations. Maybe it was the flu. Maybe it was another seasonal illness. Maybe it was something temporary. But the reality was much more dangerous. She eventually contacted a medical service because she was feeling unwell. She described symptoms that did not immediately sound like an emergency. An appointment was arranged. But she never arrived. That missed appointment became one of the final pieces of the timeline. Because sometime around that period, Betsy was gone. And inside the house, Gene Hackman remained. A man who had spent his life portraying strong characters was now living in a situation that nobody outside could see. Days passed. The world did not know. Neighbors did not know. Friends did not know. And inside the quiet home, something heartbreaking was unfolding. When authorities finally entered the property weeks later, they were confronted with a scene that created even more questions. Gene Hackman was found in one area of the house. Betsy was found in another. Their dog was also discovered. At first, investigators considered the possibilities that would normally explain a situation like this. Could there have been a gas leak? Could there have been some kind of accident? Could someone have entered the property? Every possibility had to be examined. But one by one, those theories disappeared. Testing ruled out carbon monoxide poisoning. There was no evidence of violence. No signs suggested an intruder. The medication found near Betsy was not connected to her death. The mystery remained, until investigators uncovered something unexpected. Something invisible. Something that had nothing to do with crime. The answer came from a rare illness associated with the American Southwest. A disease most people never think about because it does not come from another person. It comes from the environment. A hidden danger carried by rodents. A danger that can exist quietly around homes, buildings, and outdoor structures. And in a place where nobody expected it, it had changed everything. The investigation revealed that Betsy had likely been exposed to hantavirus, a rare but serious disease that can develop after contact with contaminated material from infected rodents. The illness can begin with symptoms that seem ordinary: fever, tiredness, headaches, and flu-like feelings. That is what makes it so dangerous. At first, it can look like something harmless. But in some cases, it can quickly become life-threatening. And suddenly, the strange details of the case started to make sense. The medical searches, the phone call, the missed appointment, the sudden collapse, the separate rooms, the silence. But even after understanding what happened to Betsy, investigators still had one major question. What happened to Gene Hackman during the days after his wife was gone? Because the answer to that question would reveal the most heartbreaking part of the entire story. A legendary actor, a private home, and a final week that nobody knew was happening. The days after Betsy Arakawa's death created the most painful and difficult part of the investigation. Because the question was no longer only about what happened to her. It was about what happened to Gene Hackman. How did a man who had spent decades being recognized around the world end up alone inside his own home, with nobody realizing that something was wrong? The answer came from a combination of medical evidence, technology, and a heartbreaking understanding of his final days. One of the most important clues came from something inside Gene Hackman's own body. His pacemaker. The device, designed to monitor his heart, recorded information that helped investigators estimate when his heart stopped beating. The data suggested that his final moments came around February 18th, several days after Betsy had likely died. That meant Gene Hackman survived for approximately a week after losing the person who had been the center of his daily life. 7 days inside a home that had suddenly become completely different. For most people, losing a spouse would bring overwhelming grief, confusion, and a desperate need to reach out for help. But Gene Hackman was not in the same position as most people. His advanced Alzheimer's disease had changed the way his mind processed the world around him. The disease does not simply affect memory. In its later stages, it can interfere with decision-making, awareness, and the ability to respond to dangerous situations. A person may feel that something is wrong but not fully understand what it means. They may experience fear or confusion but be unable to take the steps that another person would naturally take. Calling a neighbor, picking up a phone, seeking medical help. Those simple actions can become impossible. And that may have been the tragedy of Gene Hackman's final days. He may have been living in a reality where the woman who had always been there was suddenly missing, but his mind could no longer fully understand why. Investigators found no evidence that Gene contacted anyone after Betsy's death. No emergency call. No message. No attempt to bring someone into the home. Only silence. His own health was also deteriorating. The medical examination showed that Gene Hackman had severe heart disease. His heart had experienced years of damage caused by aging and cardiovascular problems. His body had already been fighting a long battle. And then, without the support system that had helped him every day, his condition became even more fragile. The final moments of his life were not caused by a crime or an outside attacker. They came from natural causes. but the circumstances surrounding them were incredibly unusual. The investigation also revealed the heartbreaking situation involving one of their dogs. The couple had several pets, and most of them survived because they had ways to move around and access food and water. But one dog, Zena, was recovering from a medical procedure and was kept in a crate. Unable to leave. Unable to reach help. The animal was found near Betsy's body, another painful reminder of how quickly an ordinary home had turned into a place of tragedy. The story raised a question that many people struggled with. How could this happen? How could two people, including one of Hollywood's most famous actors, remain unnoticed for so long? The answer was not a hidden secret. It was not a conspiracy. It was the result of several ordinary choices and circumstances coming together in the worst possible way. Gene Hackman had spent years protecting his privacy, and that privacy was respected. He did not attend public events. He did not seek attention. He lived quietly. The world had become used to not hearing from him. His home was designed around independence and peace. There was no live-in staff checking on them every day. There were no interior cameras recording their lives. There was no constant connection to the outside world. The same privacy that had given them comfort during retirement became the reason nobody immediately noticed the silence. Betsy had been the connection between their private world and the outside world. She managed appointments. She handled communication. She kept their daily life organized. When she was gone, that connection disappeared. And Gene was not able to replace it. This is what made the case so heartbreaking. It was not a story about fame. It was not a story about money. It was a story about two people who had built a quiet life together and were suddenly defeated by circumstances nobody could have predicted. A rare illness, an aging body, a devastating neurological condition, and a home that became too isolated. In the weeks after their deaths, attention shifted from mystery to remembrance. People remembered Gene Hackman not only as the legendary actor who won awards and created unforgettable characters, but as a husband, a father, and a person who wanted a peaceful life away from the spotlight. His family described the side of him that audiences rarely saw. Not the intimidating characters from movies. Not the famous Hollywood figure. But the ordinary person they loved. The investigation eventually reached a clear conclusion. There was no evidence of foul play. No criminal act. No hidden attacker. The truth was much quieter, and in many ways much sadder. Betsy Arakawa died because of a rare illness that she likely never realized was threatening her life. Gene Hackman died days later because of serious heart disease, with Alzheimer's disease playing an important role in his final circumstances. Two lives ended in the same house, but for very different reasons. The world searched for a shocking explanation. But the real answer was something far more human. A reminder that behind every famous name is a person with ordinary fears, ordinary struggles, and ordinary moments that nobody else sees. Gene Hackman spent his career pretending to be countless people on screen. But in the end, his final story was not about the characters he played. It was about the quiet life he chose. A life built around love, privacy, and the person who stood beside him for decades. And when that person was gone, the world finally saw just how much she meant. Sometimes the most powerful stories are not the ones filled with secrets and mysteries. Sometimes the truth is simply a story about two people, a lifetime together, and how fragile life can become when the person who holds everything together is suddenly no longer there.